break, but we had 2 field trips. The last one was to the North Georgia Native Plant Nursery in Canton. We strongly recommend you go there when you can. They were very nice, very informative. It's a good destination. And there aren't very many sources of native plants here in North Georgia, so promoting anybody that is selling native plants is a good thing. What's it called? North Georgia Native Plant Nursery. In Canton. Yeah. So it's a distance away from here, but it's still within our chapter's range, which goes Alabama to South Carolina. It's great for me. Okay, business. New members, Kim is in charge of that. Thank you, even though she wasn't able to be here today. And from our new members, we have one of them here. Lynn not able to come. Paula Berzotta, Daniela Calhoun, Mary Cook, Geraldine Hall, Mitchell Kent, Eric Martin, Kim Morgan, which I think is a rejoining, Erin Panter, and Susan Wells. So if you know any of those people, try to grab them in as well. So that's good. Thank you. Our finance is from Wendy. We have a little over $6,000 in the account. There hasn't been a lot of activity. The latest expense was the butterfly brochures that are up there. There's 2.
Please.
See there? Okay. That came from the Georgia Native Plant Society. And it is very appropriate that these brand new brochures available now are about butterflies, since that's what our speaker is going to be covering here. So feel free to take those. And the plant sale tax is due in January?
Yeah, it's we're on a yearly sales tax filing.
Okay.
So it's not until January, despite the fact our sales were in June this year. Just the way it rolls.
And a lot of the chapters that have been established longer and have a lot of members have plant sales spring and fall. At this point, we only have the spring sale. So before very long, you may be wanting to start propagating plants for the sale. But so we, at this point, only have the one at the Blairsville Farmers Market. We've had it the opening weekend, June 1st. But you have to get your name on the list. So, but they don't take that yet. So it's a little bit of a last-minute race. Okay, projects. We've been hearing about the Beasley Knob Native Plant Garden for a while. Robert's very involved with that as well. We installed it last fall, and then, of course, some things that are newly planted don't make it necessarily through the winter. Then we've had a month or 2 of heavy rains, and then no rain. So we haven't had a very, what's there looks pretty nice. So if you happen to be over that way, go look at it. We did officially get our certification, so we'll be able to put up these signs there that we have Connect to Protect certification, which requires that you have plants that attract pollinators blooming spring, summer, fall. So there's sort of rules that we have to make sure when we replace ones that didn't make it, that they fit the same guidelines. So it's still certified for Connect to Protect. But we have regular work days now. It's on the 2nd Monday of each month. So if you happen to be free the 2nd Sunday of the month.
Monday.
What did I say? Sunday. I said Sunday? No, it's Monday. On Monday. 2nd Monday. We do the 2nd because we do our work things here at the GEMREC. Am I pointing yes, correct direction? Okay, anyway, here they have a garden, ethnobotanical garden. It has other stuff too, but anyway, that's 1st and 3rd Mondays. So if you get involved with that, 2nd Monday is going to Beasley Knob. We also have benches to install there, which we've almost finished, but not quite. Okay, under recent events, if you picked up a copy of this, I didn't put this in, there is a petition to change the Georgia native flower. I mean, the Georgia, not native, state flower. The Georgia state flower has been the Cherokee rose, which sounds nice, except it has nothing to do with the Cherokees. It's from China. So it's an invasive species that somehow got promoted to be the state flower. So that's unfortunate. But so there's a petition now moving to get it replaced with the Sweet Bay magnolia, which is not from China. There was Thursday evening, there was the chapter council meeting for Georgia Native Plant Society, and this was one of the things that was discussed. They had a little flyer that's available. Unfortunately, the flyer says it is native across Georgia. It's not actually native up here in the mountains, but at least it's native to a good bit of Georgia. I know people plant them up here, but it's a whole lot better than having the Cherokee rose. So if you know anybody, you know your local state rep, or it's a state issue, not national. Let them know, that this matters to you, that we need a native plant to represent our state. At least it's better than Maine. Their state flower is the white pine, which is a tree that doesn't have flowers. It doesn't even have flowers, so it's the state flower, it has no flowers. But anyway, okay. Upcoming events in November, so that's 2 months, not the next meeting, but the meeting after, is our annual meeting for the chapter, and that's when the board election will be taking place. From what I've heard from the people that are current officers, that we are willing to go in for our second 2-year term. However, the vice president's position has been empty for a while, so there's nobody to continue that. So if anybody is willing to take on the vice president's role, it's not very complicated, so let me know if that's something you might be willing to take on. Another thing that says here is anyone involved with any schools, we want to, education's a big part of our existence. So if we can get involved with schools to either have presentations at the schools about the importance of native plants or help them install native plants at the school, native plant gardens, that would be much appreciated. And you can always, and the same with municipalities, if anyone's connected with the state, with your town government or anything. Because I know that Blairsville hires somebody to take care of their gardens, who apparently, obviously they're going to do things as cheaply as possible, but once you have native plants installed, they're going to be less work than non-natives. They're evolved for the ecosystem, for the insects, for the nasty soil that we have up here and stuff. So to promote that as well. So anybody that has connections there that would be willing to do that, much appreciated. Okay, that's it for the business. Anybody have questions or things they want to add in or anything? Okay, our speaker today, Becky Griffin, is very involved here. We are very grateful. It just happened to be when we got kicked out of the library for today's meeting that, our speaker happens to be very involved here. So she was able to get us here. Involved community and school garden coordinator with the extension. She's Pollinator Health Associate and certified Georgia beekeeper. So obviously bees, the pollinators, we're going to be hearing about that. Emphasizing the ecosystems in the gardens and teaching workshops on beneficial entomology, insect stuff. And she's a coordinator of the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. Did any of you participate in that? Did you? Okay. Because we didn't this year. We were in Colorado this year for that. But wonderful opportunity to focus on one plant for it's 15 minutes and notice, document all the pollinators that come to it, and it just opens your eyes quite a bit. Been with the Extension, UGA Extension for 13 years and really likes working here. Also part of the Southeast Bumble Bee Atlas program, so I assume that's tracking where they are or something?
We're looking for bumblebees that we think may still be around, that may or may not be gone.
Okay.
We do workshops on bumblebee identification.
Okay.
Services Society.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's bumblebee versus carpenter bee. On our deck, bumblebees are welcome, carpenter bees, maybe not so much. Okay, so she will have getting ready for her presentation here. Our next meeting will be back at the library. Presentation by Steverson Moffett with the Blue Ridge Ranger District. And all I had from what he's going to talk about was burns, mapping, question mark, so I'll have to get a little more detail on what he's going to talk about. But anyway.
And if you will email me and remind me about school contacts, I can make those for you.
Okay, great.
If you hear me coughing, I have fall allergies. You know, it's a joy. So, well, let me start by saying you all are my people. And so when asked to talk, it's just fun because I'm not trying to convince you of anything. We are already on the same page. And then to get to talk about monarchs to a group that I know will really appreciate this, it's just a joy. Get this out of my system. So I am stationed here at GMREC. My office is right down the hall. If any of y'all know Ray Covington, he's the superintendent. He and I just have a great time giving each other our time. So we really enjoy, I have the best job on the planet. It is statewide, so I do travel quite a bit. So I'm not here maybe about 50% of the time. But my passion is native plants and pollinators. My graduate work was in beneficial entomology, native bees specifically. And as we talked before the meeting, my first school garden I created when my daughter was in kindergarten and she's 32. So I've been pushing a long time for this. So right now, at this time of my career, I'm thrilled that I'm pushed so hard that we have a Native Plant Society. And I'm very good friends with Ellen Honeycutt. And I get to do like the Connect to Protect. I helped write the criteria for that. I'm on the Pollinator Plants of the Year committee. So I'm in all of the pieces of the pie that you all are also in. That being said, if you guys ever need me to promote anything, like if you have a sale, and I try and always, I follow you on social media, but if there's anything that you need from me that I can help promote for you, please email me or make sure that I know, and I'm very happy to do that. So, all right, let's get started. All right, so you're on, has anybody, never been to GMREC before? Okay, so you're on a 400-acre farm, research farm, and we are famous for our apple research because up here, we actually have an ecosystem that's very similar to the Midwest. My daughter lives in Cincinnati, and it's shocking how much our weather is the same, whereas my friends that live in Atlanta, it's different. So we have 2,000 apple trees on the property. We have, and they all bloom within a 3-week period of time. And within that 3 weeks, we are very concerned about apple research. And in order to make one apple that you will eat or buy at the store, that blossom needs to be visited by a pollinator 8 times. So if we have 2,000 apple trees all blooming in a 3-week period, and let's just say for math's sake, each of these trees has 100 blossoms that we want to make apples, that's a lot of pollination. So one of my main jobs here is to work with the orchard manager to make sure that they can still do the research they need to do, but we're protecting all of our pollinators, our natives, our honeybees, our native bees, and any others that we have. So it's a big task, but it makes me feel heartened because I work with a lot of Georgia farmers. Any kind of things that you hear in the national media about factory farming or the farmers are killing our soil, 99% of our farms in Georgia are family owned, and they have been for generations. And I work with many farmers who are not wanting to use chemicals because they cost money, for one thing. And so we're doing things like trap cropping using other plants, and we're doing grading in pollinators through our plant selection around the periphery of the crop. So be heartened that we are making progress and doing some fun, good things. As mentioned, my biggest passion project is the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. I started it in 2019 statewide. We started in Georgia. We are now in South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida. This was the first year for Florida. Next year, Alabama will be joining. So it is I'm not going to talk much about it today, but it is an educational initiative that also provides data that researchers are using for plant selection and pollinator economic valuation studies. So the data is being used. But I'm very passionate about this project and have a big heart for it. And I love that everybody does it. And you guys all need to be doing it next year. All right, so let's talk about monarchs, because that's why I'm here. And this presentation always makes me happy. And you guys may remember this. All right, when I was a kid growing up in Powder Springs, Georgia, we had no internet, we had no cable, we had no TV unless the wind blew, and some of you my age would get that. We got the National Geographic magazine. All right, as a scientist, as someone who loved that, I would wait until it came. And when I thought it was about time, I would run the half mile down our country driveway to see that we got it. And in 1976, this was the cover. All right, I was 12 years old. All right, so this magazine article talked about how in Mexico they knew that the butterflies went somewhere, but they didn't know where. And up here in the States, we knew the butterflies went somewhere, but we didn't know where. And in 1974, they started making the connection. And if you've seen the movie about that, it's very exciting. If you haven't, get some popcorn and look on PBS or YouTube. But they made the connection about migration of monarchs, and that was thrilling, and it was in this article. And I remember getting this magazine, and I remember thinking, gosh, can you imagine being able to see that in person? All right, so I was got to be on a scientific permit to go down to see it in person, and the 12-year-old Becky got chills to get to go. So I'm going to talk about what I saw, what I've learned, and what I've brought back and put into practice. So we know that monarchs migrate, and we know in Georgia that we are on the path for fall migration. Spring migration, the butterflies come up and stay in Texas and kind of fan more toward the middle of the country. We do have some butterflies. I mean, we all plant milkweed like crazy, just hoping and praying to see those caterpillars every year, and most of us are disappointed. And it's not necessarily that we're doing anything wrong or that there's horrific news in the butterfly world. It's that our role here in Georgia with the monarchs is this fall migration. So, if you're planting milkweed and you're not getting the results you want, it's okay. You know, we're all still doing it. I mean, every year I go out, get excited if I find one. We monitor the fall migration. I monitor it where I live. I have friends along the Blue Ridge Parkway. This is a picture from them, and they actually will count monarchs as they come over and give a report. We all report on Journey North, which tracks migration going north and going south. Migration is coming. I have seen a couple. Where I live, and I don't think I included any pictures here, I live on Elgin Mountain, and we have a prairie, a restored prairie. I don't have a lawn, but part of the reason that I grow certain things is for monarch migration, and I can literally stand and watch them come out and come down to our prairie, and I've counted 32 at one time. So this is my role. My role is to give those butterflies nutrition to get south. So I got on the permit. I was so excited. I remember saying on the phone, I'm giving you my credit card number, and my husband's like, do we have any idea what that means? I don't care. I'm going to Mexico, and I'm going to see butterflies. So I flew from Atlanta. I didn't drive this, but we came down to Mexico City and then on Gogeo, which is in the middle of nowhere, Mexico, but that's where the butterflies fly to. And this is a picture out of the plane of where the butterflies are going. So they also have mountain areas, and they have fir trees, where we have a lot of pines and oaks and very deciduous forests. And this is what we're looking for. We're looking for these these monarchs. So the monarchs that are migrating south that we're going to see are biologically different than the monarchs that are here in the spring and the summer. All right, they are bigger. Their spots on the side that are white are actually bigger. They are born with the ability, or they're declosed is the correct word. They come out of their chrysalis with the ability to metabolize a higher amount of lipids, and they also come out without the ability to want to mate. All right, so if this biological wonder is to get them to Mexico. This tiny little butterfly is going to go about 10,000 feet up, use a lot of gliding through the atmosphere to go almost 2,000 miles to Mexico. This one butterfly. So when they're migrating south, they need nutrition and they need places to roost at night. They can't lay eggs on milkweed because they don't have the biology to do that yet. All right, so that's something to remember when we look at these. We have a wonderful scientist, and his name is Andy Davis, and he does primarily work on monarchs, and he talks about it all the time. He and I will get on the phone and just talk about monarchs, and they are very solar efficient. Their colorings and markings that just seem beautiful to us actually have a purpose, and it's to help give them some energy to get to Mexico, okay? So we all see lots of posters. We see all of the milkweed, which we all love to plant, and we've learned about the life cycle. You all know the life cycle of butterflies and how it is a multi-generational migration. The monarchs that we're seeing are one generation. They're going to fly all 2,000 miles. They're going to roost. They're going to come out of diapause in Mexico. They're going to mate there. And they're going to start laying eggs in Texas, and then the generations are going to continue until the super generation, or in Mexico they call them the Methuselah generation, is born. So again, just to know that those butterflies are biologically different than the ones that we see in the summertime. So when I get to Mexico, one of the things that really is interesting to me is that the entire country has embraced monarchs and how important they are. So I saw artwork everywhere we went. Now, on a side note, I am not gifted in language. And I decided that I was going to embrace this whole experience and I was going to learn some Spanish. And I did. And when we got to Mexico, we were required to have a guide to go on the properties. And he spoke English and Spanish. Our driver spoke no English. But y'all know what I learned was I'm not trying to pass a test like when we were in college and had to learn French, right? I just needed to communicate. So if I could get what I needed for the driver to know just by using a few words, yo agua necesito por favor, then he would give me water. And it didn't matter if my grammar was wrong. He thought I was a hoot, and he liked to sit with me at dinner and laugh at my Spanish. I also am a big runner and hiker, and my husband and I hike out in the Rockies usually once a year. Wednesday I'm leaving to go hike in the Alps. But I knew we were going to be at 11,000 feet, and if any of you are hikers there, you know that altitude sickness is a thing. So while I'm learning Spanish, I'm also training, because I know that I'm having to hike 7 miles in at 11,000 feet, and I was going to see them. I was not going to get sick. So it was a while to get ready to go to make the most of the experience. And so we saw a lot of really nice art. I was very excited when we got here, and I could tell our guide, let me translate, I know those words. So Sisters of the Sun is what we're looking at. And in Mexico, monarchs have sort of a spiritual connection. They arrived in Mexico at Angangeo around the time of what we call Halloween, what they call the Day of the Dead. And that's a very big holiday there. They will actually go to the graveyards and decorate their ancestors' graves and have picnics and festivals. And in some folklore, the monarchs are actually the spirits of those ancestors. And so it is a very spiritual experience for the Mexicans in rural areas to have the butterflies come back, which you see a lot of skeletons and things, and that's why. That's their connection to Day of the Dead. They also have their 100 pesos is the monarchs as well. So again, the whole country is very much aware of how important the monarchs are to them. As part of my trip, we were actually able to go visit a school at Ongongayo. So this is a very rural school. Nobody spoke English there, and we very much enjoyed our time there, and we got to meet a lot of really interesting children who did not speak English. But we had a translator, and we would ask them questions like, what do you think about the monarchs? And we'd ask the teachers, how are you protecting the forest? Are you teaching them that they can't cut down the fir trees? That type of thing. They wanted to know what our kids ate in the United States and what kind of sports they played. So it was pretty fun. It was a pretty fun experience, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in a minute. We also got to visit some temples in Mexico. This is a very famous temple right outside Mexico City, so not close to Ongongayo, but this is what caught my eye. What is that? That's a monarch. This is part of a warrior's headdress. All right. So not only did, and these are thousands and thousands of years old, and this is not right in Ongongayo. This is in Mexico City. So monarchs made enough of an impression to warriors that they included them on their gear. All right. That's got to be pretty powerful. And here's another picture of that headdress, all of those butterflies. So they did not point that out to us, and I don't know why, because to me that says a whole lot. And when I saw this, and then I met a local in Ongongayo, a woman who is very passionate about butterfly conservation, who's my age, she talked about when she was a little girl, she was scared of the butterflies. Because when they came in migration, they were so thick, they would block out the sun for days. And that was terrifying to a small child. It doesn't happen anymore. Right? So we get down to Ongongayo and I start seeing butterflies. And when I started packing for the trip, when I looked at historical climate data, I saw that we could be in the 20s at night. So I packed a lot of warm clothes. It was in the 70s. It was unusually warm. Wow. And the butterflies were 3 weeks ahead of migration. So when I went, what we thought we'd find were butterflies still in clusters that were already coming out of diapause and looking to mate. So climate change is definitely taking its toll. Their forests are a little different than ours. If any of you native plant people will be interested to know, these oil-mill firs are beautiful, and they provide good roosting places for the butterflies. And it's important there because it is cold enough that the butterfly's metabolism slows down, but it's not too cold that they freeze. It is dry enough that water doesn't mold them, but it's wet enough that they can get water. So it is a perfect balance. Anything that shifts there is going to affect the monarch population. In that forest, they also have an understory of blooming shrubs. You know, in our forests, we have our spring ephemerals that everyone loves, and then I think our fall wildflowers just blow everybody else away. But as a general rule, we do not have sages, which are native there, this high, blooming in the middle of the forest, which we saw quite a bit of. And so these butterflies coming out of diapause are hungry, and they already had blooming plants there. So very pretty. And one thing I want to tell you back here was that there is a monarch reserve called the El Rosario Monarch Butterfly Reserve. And it was designated a UNESCO site in 2008. Right? So it is considered an amazing natural phenomenon that the world wanted to protect. However, some local people that live there have problems with that, and they feel that they should be able to do whatever they want to with their area, and their population is growing, and they are wanting to cut down the fir trees. So with international funds in 2020, they've been hiring before that managers of these sites to kind of be like forest rangers. In 2020, 2 butterfly activists, including the sanctuary manager, Homero Gonzalez, were murdered. And their bodies were shown as a warning to others to not mess with how we want to run our part of Mexico. So between that and some of the gangs between Mexico City and Nogeo, it is becoming increasingly difficult to protect this area. Now, one story that I did not share with my husband until I was way back home, because he wasn't real thrilled about this trip anyway, was twice we were stopped as tourists and foreigners in Mexico and shaken down for money. And the first time, I'm thinking this is a great adventure, because I have a naive sense of being, I guess. And the driver spoke to our guide, who turned around and told us in the van, keep your eyes straight ahead, don't say anything, and don't move, let me handle this. And then I started getting a little nervous when our roadway was blocked by very big burly men who came and demanded money. And that happened to us twice. So it is, it's Mexico. And it's just a little contentious of what's going on down there with the butterflies. So a little butterfly fact that you can amaze your dinner partners with. We can tell the difference between male and female butterflies by what they look like. So this is a female, male, and he has 2 little receptors that are dark spots on his wing veins. And those are for him to receive the pheromones, helping him find a mate. All right, this is a female, and you can see her wing veins are darker and thicker because she's giving off that pheromone. So if you see a butterfly that looks like this, with the dots, that's a male. This one with no dots but thicker veins is a female. And so there's your wonderful little butterfly fact. And we saw a lot of beginnings of matings down there. They were 3 weeks early. All right, so here's some pictures of what I saw. So we were a small group. We were behind the rope, so we got to go where the average people do not get to go, which was very fun for us. And at one point, I went around a corner, and I was the only human I saw. And they were in my hair, and they're bigger, and there were so many, I could hear their wings flap. Wow. All right? So from this young 12-year-old girl who saw it in the National Geographic magazine, and I was with a whole bunch of entomologists, and we cried because it was such an amazing phenomenon. We also saw the clusters. This is what they look like. And the butterflies will rotate who's on the outside and who's on the inside. And sometimes the limbs get so heavy they will break and fall. And my guide, the driver, who was from Mexico, and again didn't speak any English, we had one person who was a professional photographer, and she loved that camera all over, and she missed everything because she had to set the camera up. So I took my little cell phone, and what he told me to do is put it on slow motion and just do this. And I got some pretty amazing footage. And of course, when you're in the middle of something like this, you also want to be part of the moment, so you don't, you put your phone down after a while. But this kind of captures some of the, because you can see the butterflies are bigger, and they would just fly around me. I wasn't messing with them. Nobody in our group's trying to capture them, or they do have groups that tag butterflies to see, how far they come, and how that works is if the butterfly is dead on the ground and there's a tag, they actually pay people to remove the tag and turn it in. And then there's a whole data entry place where you can look and let those people know that those butterflies made it. So it was pretty intense. So it was pretty amazing. So at this point, I'm in awe and and speechless. And then I start thinking about my yard, my garden, and my responsibility to keep this going. But this was all my cell phone. I actually have this particular video on my desktop, and when I'm having a bad day, I watch it. Because it makes me feel, okay, the world is okay. There's some wonder. So I started thinking about my world and my responsibility. And this is a young woman who's in the 6th grade at the school I mentioned earlier. And when we went in there and had discussions with the teachers and the students, and we had the typical arrogant American attitude. We're doing everything right. Y'all are doing everything wrong, right? So we go to Mexico with that attitude, and we say to them, what are you doing? What are you doing to protect the butterflies? What are you doing to prevent the fir trees from falling down? What are you doing to mitigate the climate change that's happening down here? This little girl sat in the back and listened, and then we're finished, and she stood up. And through a translator, she said, every year we see less and less butterflies coming our way. What are you doing? And we went, okay, it still makes the back of my hair stand up. And she's right. If you think about what they see the butterfly. They never see the chrysalis. They never see the caterpillars. And it's really dependent on milkweed going up and habitat coming down. And she was right. And she put us all in our place. And our whole ride home, the discussion was what this 6th grade girl taught us. So what can we do? And what did I learn from talking to them? And what have I learned as an entomologist? Well, we love milkweed. Plant your milkweed. Make sure it's native. Make sure it's native milkweed. And if you get a caterpillar and you get a chrysalis, jump up and down and be excited and thrilled. I get calls every year from people who have planted milkweed and their butterfly has laid eggs and they don't have enough milkweed to sustain those monarchs. Now, a monarch butterfly lays one egg at a time on the underside of a leaf. And the monarch larva, the caterpillar, eats milkweed because milkweed contains cardioglycosides, which will cause problems if a bird or a predator eats it. Now, depending on the plant, individual plant, and the conditions, some of that does not transfer to the caterpillar, some of it does. But just like nature, in a lot of nature, she's going to lay far more eggs than she thinks are than nature's going to allow to come to fruition. And caterpillars are bird food, even monarchs. So I will have people trying to find someone where they can capture these caterpillars and put them on milkweed. And they get very angry with me when I say it is part of the whole ecosystem, you have to leave them alone. And we know by handling the caterpillars, they don't have a heartbeat, but they do have a system, a hemolymph system, and it stresses out the caterpillars to be messed with. And it makes sense. If you had a big giant and you're doing your thing and they're picking you up, your heartbeat would, you would be stressed. And that's what happens to the caterpillars. So, we just can't have that. But plant your milkweed, plant native, enjoy it. I teach a lot of classes on how to grow milkweed from seed. I worked with Fannin County school systems to teach their students that skill, and we gave away, I think, a total of 700 milkweed plants at our community giveaway last May of native mountain milkweed. So I definitely love milkweed, and I'm not saying don't plant that, but don't get disturbed if you're not seeing a lot of action on it. Another thing to know, as a side note, is I do a lot of firefly research. And there are species of fireflies that also consume milkweed for the same reason. So milkweed, good. No problems there. And I took this picture in case somebody had not seen a chrysalis before. The caterpillars will eat the milkweed and crawl away from the milkweed and try and find a hiding place to go into chrysalis. And they call them monarchs for what we were told is when white people discovered them, they called them monarchs because the coloring was similar to one of the monarchs in Europe. But I think they're called monarchs because of the gold crown on the outside of the chrysalis, because it really is gold. All right, again, we're emphasizing that our role to help these monarchs is to provide nutrition going south. All right, now, I will say a couple words from Andy Davis, who always likes me to mention this. We have groups of people who like to raise monarchs in containers and then release them. And what they're finding unequivocally is those monarchs do not ever make it to Mexico. They need to be out. They need to have their native situation. They don't need to be handled. So hand raising them is not helping the overall population. But what we can do is make sure they have food going down. This is my favorite non-native plant. It is called Tithonia, or Mexican sunflower. It is a seed that you can plant. It's not invasive. It's not going to overseed. It is tall. All right, so you're a butterfly, and you're hanging out about 10,000 feet up, and you're getting hungry, and you need to get a break. All right, so how you're going to find resources are two ways. The first way is a chemical way, and it's how insects kind of what we call fragrance. All right, so if you have one Tithonia, the chances of it giving a fragrance are pretty slim. If you have a stand of big pollinator plants that are tall and have blooms that are really tall toward the sky, then maybe the butterflies will catch that fragrance. And as they start coming down, then they use visual clues to find where your stuff is. So when you go to landscape school, you're taught to plant in 3s and 5s. If you have unlimited property to do any kind of pollinator work, 7s and 9s. You want a stand of something so that they can find it. So Tithonia is one I highly recommend, and the butterflies look pretty on it too when you're taking pictures. Although this is not a monarch. This is Joe Pye weed. It is a native. It's already blooming, very tall. In theory, the deer won't eat it. That's not true. They mine to the ground every time. But it has this kind of flower that butterflies like. Butterflies like flowers. They can rest their wings and get their nectar. They do not like flowers as much where they have to hang up like this and balance their wings. So these type of plants are mostly flat where they can just land and get some nectar. So that's something to consider. This is one of my favorite plants, ironweed. The deer really don't like that very much. They may sample it, but it contains compounds that they don't like. It is also tall. All right, so you're thinking, if I'm a butterfly, what can I find? So ironweed is another one. Boneset is probably my favorite native right now. It always changes. This is actually at my house. We have restored a prairie. And I have a big problem with overgrazing of deer, so much so that I can routinely count 40 deer when I leave my property before I get to the road. All right, now one positive of that is that it is so cute when they drop the deer off for daycare, because it is a native prairie, so we have a lot of grasses, and they don't think we can see them, but we have a big porch and I can watch them, and so that is very sweet. But the rest of the year, they eat everything. So anything that has lasted in this prairie is stuff they're not going to eat. And boneset has chemicals that they won't even sample the boneset. The fragrance alone will keep them from eating boneset. And we also have a lot of goldenrod. They will not eat goldenrod. Now, I have not, one year, I have a little greenhouse area. I grew out from seed 100 coneflower plants. And this was when I was younger and naive. I was so excited. I was going to add, it was going to be so pretty in the meadow, being more of a meadow than a prairie. So I grow them out. I water those things. I hard them off. It's Saturday planting day. I'm out there. I'm singing my song. I'm planting my plants. And I swear, the deer watch me go in and they eat all of them down. All right? So I now have a fenced-in area that the deer cannot get in for my coneflower and some other fun pollinator plants. But those natives, also what I do is when we have gotten so they won't spray the roadsides of our mountain, but they will mow. So if I see the mowers at the bottom of the mountain, that means I have my shovel in my Jeep, and anything this far off the road is mine. And so I will transplant native helianthus, some native asters, and also those are starting to populate in there as well. This type of thing is a lot of fun because we get a lot of monarchs. I can sit there, and a lot of it's timing. Are you home when they come? My husband works from home, and he's so funny. He'll call me. I think it's butterflies. I'm going to go see. Or one day I got home from work. It had been a very long day. I turn and look up to see if any are coming, and I counted 32. and they just come right down and land on that bone set, and I'm like happy dancing around and taking pictures and like, good luck. So it's an evolving process. I worked with Wayne Estes on this concept. Our prairie is about 6 years old, and it's always evolving and always growing. This is an example of a pollinator plant garden that I put in at a community garden. I do a lot of that. I asked them for at least a 4x8 bed for pollinator plants, and you can see we have native bee balm, we've got some helianthus there, some ironweed, rattlesnake master. All of those are wonderful late bloomers for monarchs. All right, so if you love monarchs and monarchs are your insect of choice, make sure to connect with Monarchs across Georgia. Excuse me. They do amazing work. And they also do some work they do this thing called symbolic migration, where they work with school children in the United States to color and send butterflies to the school children on Bongao during fall migration. And then the children down there will decorate butterflies for the spring and send it back. So it's like pen pals. And they talk about butterflies. Again, if you have not participated in the census, consider thinking about it. If you guys ever wanted to do some of the chapters, like the in-town chapter of the Native Plant Society did 4 events on Census Weekend, where they invited people to come to their gardens that they wanted to promote, and they got to show their gardens off, and they also did census work. So there's a lot of ways to use the census to your advantage as a group to showcase the work that you're doing. So just kind of consider that. Another thing I wanted to mention is I'm very honored that Susan Richmond wrote a book about the census. So she contacted me after the very first census. She's, if you have children, you may have her books on your shelf. She lives in Boston. She had followed along our social media with the census and was very intrigued. Came down in 2022 and counted with me and wrote a book. And it will be, this is what it looks like, and it will be out in the bookstores in April 2025. And we will be doing, because the census originated with me and here, we have events planned at Bookbound Bookstore. That's my local bookstore. So she will be there visiting, talking about the census. And all I asked of her was that it's a girl's main character, and it is. And she has curly hair like me. So that was pretty nice. It's a beautiful book, and it talks about children and getting them to love insects of all kinds and how the census works. So keep your eyes out for that. She did an amazing job, and it was definitely an honor to do that. I'm still accepting census numbers, so I have no real numbers to give you, but these are our last 5 years. So we've had 12,000 people. I know we're over 17,000 this year because I can't. And we're over, I think there were over 300 new pollinator gardens created because of the project this year. So I appreciate your support here. And with that, I'll take any questions. Yes, ma'am.
What size space of sunlight is necessary for attracting pollinators? I mean, we live in a very treed area, have just a few spots. And is that important? I mean,
well, here's my philosophy on that. Anything is better than nothing.
yeah.
And I work in Atlanta and have created pollinator gardens on balconies where they've gotten butterflies.
But you need that sunlight, not mostly for the plants, but also for the butterflies to be able to see it, right?
Right, to some extent. Now, you can have along woodland edges and still have butterflies. A lot of our ephemerals are pollinated by native flies and small bees that live in the woods all year long. Or, they're dipods in the woods and they'll come out. So don't think that if you just have a shaded area that you can't do anything for pollinators, because you really can. There's a lot of shaded plants that grow in the woodlands along the edges. And think of all of our natives, that, like if you're hiking, all those native asters that have bumblebees all over them. Our native hydrangeas, I actually went out and looking for a species of butterfly, our species of bumblebee, when our native hydrangeas were blooming. And they're deep in the woods, and they're covered with insects. So don't be discouraged if that's your...
But for monarchs, do they go in the woods? No.
Not much. Because they can't, if they're hidden, they can't smell them, they can't see them.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you won't get one. You might, but it won't be, 32. And that's okay. That's okay.
Go on the roof.
Hi, I wanted to add, I live in a deeply shaded area too. I get some dappled sunlight, but so I grow mostly, natives that do well in shade. But I've noticed that whenever sunlight hits that area, even just for 30 minutes, that's when the pollinators find the plants.
And some of our native butterflies will have their larval plant a tree. So like our swallowtails, our native swallowtails, their larval plants are trees. So they are enclosing in a forest. So they're still looking around. It's just, the migrating ones are harder to...
And the other question I had, did the deer eat the milkweed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, every time. And, I could just... Because I will plant something, and they will sample it, which means they'll take off that apical meristem, and so the plant won't bloom, and they don't like it, but they killed it. They decided, I don't like this. So I have, in front of the cabin, I have like a onion garden. So I have southern nodding onion plants, which are terribly beautiful. They don't smell, like I can't smell them on the porch, and I get a ton of pollinators, and then the prairie onions as well, along with some chives. And I try and tuck milkweed in there, because I like the tuberosa. Oh, they'll just bend right over. Yeah, they've taken down maple trees. They've taken down... I will go home and see them on their hind legs taking down maple trees. Yeah.
Yeah, and the deer are overpopulated because we've gotten rid of the predators that were there before. But the plants did evolve with getting some eating by the deer. So, you don't have to get rid of all deers. If you have 40 of them on your property, a bit more of a challenge. But I think a lot of people think you can't have anything that deer will ever eat. Well, there's such a thing. The native plants are going to be deer.
And what's interesting is I do a lot of work with NRCS people, and they did this study up here several years ago, maybe 3 or 4, looking for deer. And what they found is deer are not stupid. If they are in the woods, chances of them getting shot during hunting season are much higher than on the roadsides. So they have this learned behavior that the roadsides are safer, even though some of them get hit by cars. So the NRCS, I live near Cooper's Creek Wildlife Management Area, and they'll do all these surveys and trail cams and not see very many deer, whereas driving up to there, they'll see 20 or 30 on the side of the road. So, yes, it is, it's definitely, but the overgrazing is a problem. And we had meadows and prairies before this was all forested, and the native people burned them down, which made them come back more resilient. So, it's tricky.
So, do you have a mowing schedule?
So for our prairie, which is primarily grasses with flowers, we will mow it down. One time, my husband has an electric mower, and it is usually the end of February, 1st of March. And the reason is because we want the ground to get enough sun that the spring wildflowers will come up. With all the grasses that we have, by that time, all the seeds are gone, the birds have eaten them. They have ground cover for birds, but if we remove that layer of grass, then we get more of the flowers. So one time a year, he mows down, and then we go through. I don't like a lot of dog fennel, so we pull that up. I don't want thistle, even though it's native, because it has a million seeds and will take over. So the only real maintenance after that, because we're established now, is that we will take a walk in the prairie, and as I see a dog fennel, I will pull it up. And then that's pretty much it.
Why do you not like dog kennel?
Because it takes over. If I had, it's a really good roosting plant for like our little hair streaks and other things, but it tends to take over. So we pull it up.
Yeah, I'm getting it. We have a meadow slash prairie that we're restoring. And I'm noticing more dog kennel this year, but it was native, so I'm like, okay, so I should just keep it minimized.
Yeah, and everybody's got to figure out, their own thing. But, if you have the opportunity to do something like that, it is so much less work. There's no chemicals involved at all. And in the enjoyment, like we have a skunk family. And we see the baby skunks, which are this big and hang right with their mother. I mean, come on, And then we have a bobcat that jumps real high as she walks. And we have 2 fox families, and I know where their dens are. And we have a bluebird. My friend Jim Beard is a bluebird guy for the state. He came up and put a bluebird house. We get a ton of migrating birds because right now the grass is putting out seeds. So I would be outside and hear birdsong that's not normal, and then I look and I find black and white warbler or something like that. So the benefits, besides the ecological native plants, not a lot of work. I love my insects, or we get all this other wildlife.
How big is your prairie?
This is our 6th year.
No, how?
About half an acre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So we have no lawn. We have some trees. I have a fenced-in area that I can grow coneflowers and play around with that, and then the rest of it is the prairie. So when you're on the porch, you just see the prairie.
That's interesting. We have probably, what would you say, Greg, 1.5 to 2 acres?
No, 2.5 acres.
2.5 acres.
It's just gone to.
Area that we're restoring to. It used to be a family farm way back, then it became a subdivision. So all the places around, they're all acre lots. So everywhere around us, they're mowed like a golf course. And then there's us.
Yeah, I've been there.
And it was interesting in the summer that we could look out and the number of fireflies was just incredible.
Yeah.
But you looked over there where it was mowed and
There's nothing.
nada.
Not only mowed, but the chemicals.
Well, that's the other thing. We have neighbours. I tried to educate, but it's like bashing my head against a brick wall. It's just, we use no chemicals. The only thing we might use Roundup on is we do have some Bradford. The whole area was planted with Bradford pears. We took ours out, but we are still struggling with some that pop up in the. And if we are having trouble, we'll paint Roundup on it to kill the dang thing.
Yeah, I do a lot of firefly research, and since I've done it up here, I see beautiful areas that I will go and visit. Now there's homes and lawns, and I have to just, but and I did doing educational things, like I've done this big push in Fannin County for firefly education, and people will come to me and say, when I was a kid, I used to see fireflies, and I go to their house and they have a lawn that they have chemicals. And I said, do you not understand that the firefly is a firefly for 3 weeks? The rest of the time, it's a larva in the ground. So every time you put crap in the ground, you're killing the firefly larva. So don't blame the farmers, for what's going on in your property. But I do a lot of with Lynn Faust, and she's a firefly expert for the Southeast, and we are finding more fireflies that we thought were rare and that we thought maybe extinct. We're seeing more of them. Recently, they came out with an article saying that they found at the State Botanical Gardens the Loopy 5 fireflies, and I knew they were there. I've seen them for years, but you don't make a big deal about that because people will love them to death and park on their habitat and, that type of thing. But, it's, people are shocked when I say you're never going to have them. As long as you're putting stuff in your lawn, you will never have a high percentage.
Yeah, even the number of birds that are flying over, because we have a high deck too, so we look over the other properties as well as ours, and you see where the birds are.
It's like a no-brainer, right? It's like, why is this an issue? So, yes.
In our neighborhood too, there the rules. You're supposed to mow so often and stuff, especially if you don't have it built on the lot. But But we have sections that we call our meadows, and people are complimenting us all the time. And it is interesting now with this incredible drought we're having that the tall goldenrod are just taking off, and it looks beautiful. But the part of the field, of the property that we have been getting mowed, we have been mowing it. When we were out of town, we hired somebody to mow it. They mowed it too short. And so with the drought, it's just all dead. Yeah. But the meadow, you let it go, it's beautiful. When you were talking about milkweed, is that Asclepias?
Yes.
Okay, because ours are mostly spring bloomers, but we are getting some that are coming back for a second round. So
Usually milkweed will do 2 rounds for you.
okay,
The spring round and then right about now.
yeah, okay. So we have a few coming in. Okay, good.
Yeah, and I love tuberosa because I love that orange color.
Yeah.
And bumblebees love it.
And in the spring when they're in full bloom at our house, it's like, did we hire those guys to all come in there?
Yeah.
Two questions.
Sure.
I have a lot of lighter leaf sage on my mostly grassy acre. And, I didn't know if you could speak to what pollinates it. And
Yes. So the easiest thing for you to do is to go sit right down in front of it and watch what comes. But their lighter leaf sage has a little lip on the flower. And so we have some smaller bumblebees that will actually, like worker bees, that actually will use their weight to open that lip up. So you will find smaller bees, felicid bees, and you'll find some smaller bumblebees. So
Felicid?
like small, almost metallic-looking bees.
Oh, okay.
So that's the 2 things that you will definitely find buzzing around there.
My second question is not as happy a circumstance. I've got lots and lots of Japanese knotweed in the wetter part of my yard, and I'm trying to get rid of it. I mowed. I probably have to mow all through the summer to keep it up, to get it under control where it'll stop reproducing.
Yeah, it's invasive. I see it, you're going to have to pull it up. If you have, and I'm a non-chemical person generally, but if you have a large area, if you could damage it and then judiciously, not overwhelmingly apply Roundup, then that will go to the roots, as long as you're not pouring it on, because it's awful. It's an invasive and it shades everything else out. And the older it gets, the harder it is to remove it. I'm sorry. That is not a happy tale.
I have moved up here recently, and my side yard is just kind of wide open. I mean, there are some trees, but my neighbor has like a corn silo, so I've got like 8 or 10 deer every day, and then they drift over to the side yard. What would be some plants, some native plants that I could start with? I have noticed that there is one plant, to me it kind of has the leaves of like a coneflower that they walk right around it and they don't nibble on it, but I would like to like rewild the side yard. I don't know what to start with.
Well, we can tell you probably the things they won't eat. Deer don't like things that have perfume, like herbs. Like they won't eat your kitchen garden because they're not going to eat lavender. They're not even going to sample thyme. So mountain mint, they will never eat mountain mint. They won't even go through mountain mint. But mountain mint is, and that is an amazing pollinator plant. We chose it as a pollinator plant of the year last year. It is still a mint, so it's going to spread.
Right.
And you probably don't want a monoculture of just mountain mint on that side yard. But it is, we have native mountain mints. I see them when I hike all the time. It's easy to get them. Once you plant it, it's good. It's thick. Rabbits like to hide in it, and deer will not eat it.
Yeah, I've seen a rabbit in the little fenced-in area of my backyard. I think he lives under the storage barn, which is cool. As long as it doesn't eat my coneflowers, we're fine. But I've seen like the native plant guy who tries to restore prairies in Alabama. He has like a lot of that. I think it's brown-eyed Susan.
Yeah.
Is that something to look at? I mean, are the deer going to eat that too?
There are native Helianthus and native sunflowers and native, like swamp sunflower is a really good native. It gets tall. And they don't like it. It does have kind of an odor or flavor, but if you plant it young, they will sample it. So try and plant bigger plants that don't have the tender vegetation, but already have that fragrance or that, you know what I'm talking about, that smell. Like if you crush a leaf, that smell, they don't like that. But they will sample it. I have some on my property, and when it was young, they will sample it. Boneset, again, there's several different varieties of boneset. They won't even sample it. The white flowers you saw, goldenrod, they won't even sample it. Ironweed is another good one. Those are all fall bloomers. And the Helianthus or the brown-eyed Susan starts in the summer and will bloom all the way through. And then, of course, the mountain mint. Everything else, the milkweed, they sample and or eat to the ground. If they're hungry enough, they'll eat anything.
Yeah, I've noticed they've eaten some of the hydrangea, like not the oak leaf, but the commercial one.
Yeah.
That the people before me planted on the side of the house. I mean, they stripped it down. They stripped down hostas, which they can have those.
That's like Training 101.
Yeah.
I have friends who will plant hostas like trap cropping, so that the deer will eat the hostas and maybe leave everything else alone because they love hostas so much.
Yeah.
And the hostas have a lot of water for them. And when it's dry, and they can't get water from a creek or whatever.
Yeah, I'm going to dig them up there in the front, like pathway to the front door, and they eat that down to the ground several times, which, again, I don't care, don't want to, so I want to dig them out, but, and have them.
And depending on where you are, in our case, we are the only full-time people on a mountain. You have woods, you have my house, you have woods.
Yeah.
So we have a tremendous deer pressure. If you live in a subdivision where there's a lot of houses around, you might not have the deer pressure we have. If you live closer to town, you might not see 40 in your driveway when you're trying to leave for work. But they're coming out of the forest, and then, oh, look, green stuff. We're going to eat before we go back in the forest.
Yeah, that's what I noticed today, because you can hear the silo when it kicks off, it's apparently on the timer, and then, here they come out of the woods, and then they just like, oh, that was nice, let me just see what's over here.
I'm still hungry.
Yeah, and so they've been, and for the most part, I'm okay, but I would really love to have some color over there.
I understand. So those are ones that, from my personal experience, and I'm sure this group may have others to give you, but I have gone to, they even had one here, a person who gave a lecture on deer-resistant plants. And I'm like, there's no deer-resistant plant. It's just how hungry are they? And the only thing I have known them never to eat, not even sample, is the mountain mint in the boneset. Everything else at younger, they may sample.
I can highly recommend the ironweed.
Is that the one that's purple?
Exactly. For a weed, it is incredibly showy.
Yeah.
The deer won't touch it. It can just take all kind of weather abuse. They're just wonderful.
That purple color.
Does it need to be in the wet?
Oh yeah.
Our ironweed's doing really well, and it's completely droughted, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be in a wet spot?
No. And it's that purple color is just spectacular.
And the fact that so many of our native plants have this weed attached to the name. It's like, for people who are new to native plants, they go, oh, there's weeds. Like, yeah, they're all called weeds because they are here without being planted. They were here before you came along.
I've started calling it like iron plant and
there you go.
plant, to the uninitiated, just so that it gets in their head.
It's a good
and it's a good thing.
One thing too that I tell people all the time is if you have a list of plants that you want, let's say you want to buy some ironweed or iron plant. When you go to a big box store or a nursery, we know all sorts of big box nurseries. And if they do not have it, ask the manager. Because the more people that go in and start asking for native plants, and then these people, because I will go and I will walk out with nothing, but I will say to the manager, I came in here for these plants, They should be here. Why are you not selling them? And the Pollinator Plants of the Year program that we started with the State Botanical Gardens, we started for that reason. And it was milkweed. Milkweed, they would only sell tropical milkweed, which is horrific here.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean. You've all been to nurseries and that's the only. So, but when you ask them, why do you not have it? And then you dig deeper, those seeds have to be stratified. And that means that's more work on the nursery people to propagate. So the State Botanical Gardens have started going into these nurseries, the greenhouses, and teaching them how to do this so that we would have more of these plants. So if you go somewhere and they don't have what you want, make sure the manager knows that. Because they're going to sell plants to make money. And we can't get what we want. I have pitched a fit in a nursery in Marietta because I went in and they had these rows and rows of tropical milkweed. And I picked up the tropical milkweed trays and took them to the manager's office and said, what are you doing here? You know, how can you do this? Where is the native milkweed? This is horrific for our butterflies. And I'm sure after my fit and I left, he put them right back out. But I was like, you know, you just can't, what is wrong with people? You just can't do that.
Becky, what about the fir trees? I know in the Appalachians we've had a problem with the balsam woolly and belchhead.
Yes.
I didn't know if you were dealing with that in Mexico as well.
I don't know the answer to that. I did not see any woolly Belgians.
We would have seen lots and lots of dead firs if they were a problem.
Well, and you can see you can see them on the hemlocks. We have the hemlocks here treated.
Yeah. The only thing the woolly adelgid gets on is hemlock.
Yeah, it really does.
They do have some relatives that are sucking insects that are related that do get on fir trees.
Yeah.
But what seems to be the biggest trouble there is that the warm temperatures, just not getting as cold down there as it used to get. Similar to, we used to have when I was a kid in Georgia, we had Sky Valley. Anybody remember Sky Valley? Mm-hmm. They don't even try and make snow anymore because it's not cold enough anymore in the winter. But did you have a question?
Wisteria.
Yeah.
Last spring, I was leaving to come to a meeting, and my husband had a guy come in and he sprayed everything trying to kill the wisteria. I had a very large patch of cleavers that I was babying, and he sprayed everything. I told him he was doing it wrong.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So, what can we do to fight the wisteria? I mean, it's getting out of hand.
Yeah, I've seen it take down old porches and,
I mean, I got a good, nice walking stick from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wrapped around a sapling. But other than that, it's no good.
No. It's awful.
So, do you have to cut it and...
Yeah, since it's mostly a vine, just like if you have, and some people are so excited about natives that, Ellen Honeycutt and I had this conversation. Poison ivy is a good pollinator plant. I can't deal with poison ivy in my yard. But it's a vine that climbs a tree. So if I cut the vine at the bottom, it dies. So instead of trying to spray the tree or whatever, I'm cutting off all nutrition for that vine and it'll die. And wisteria, a lot of times, is a vine that's climbing whatever. If you can cut it off, it's going to die because you're not getting any nutrition.
It puts out runners, 30, 50 feet long.
It's
I used to grow Carolina jessamine when I lived in Cobb County.
Yes.
And I know it's a coastal plain native, so Georgia's a big state, and even though I was growing something that's native to my state, I was actually growing it out of its range, so I didn't know where I stand morally with that.
Okay, well, and Ellen and I have had, you will notice, in the past couple of years, her definition of native has changed, because I've been on her about this. What is native? Okay? In Georgia, if you look at the history of our state, before it was a forest, it was a meadow. There were meadows here. And the native peoples exchanged plants, especially those with medicinal value. So some of our ephemerals that we love to see were actually not here, before native peoples exchanged. So what is the definition of native? And it just depends on what in my head, if it's not invasive, and it's not, and it has some ecological value, I'm cool with it. Now, we had one of the native pollinator plants of the year was Conradina, which is false rosemary, which is a coastal plant, but it grows up here just fine. And it has purple blooms in February when there's not much else blooming. There was a person in the Native Plant Society of the Coastal Plains chapter who sent me hate mail. You are being irresponsible promoting this plant in the state. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this plant is not invasive. It is not taking the place of anything else. The pollinators love it. I'm cool with it. You know, so you just have to make peace with what you want to do. I grow Tithonia. I grow herbs that I eat that aren't native, but I'm staying away from anything invasive. And if I can put something that has native ecological value, that's my first choice. But Confederate jasmine is beautiful, so I get it.
It's easy enough to control it. If I saw it growing where I didn't want it, I'd just chop it.
Yeah. And then another, you know, I run all of the social media for the Pollinator Census, and we have over 7,000 people in many countries who will come to this site for educational purposes. And I will have a new gardener, all right? This person has never gardened in their life, and they plant a butterfly bush. Now, my first thought is, but if I rag on this person for her horrible plant choice, is she going to plant anything else? No. So you're going to say, enjoy the butterflies, but you know, when you want to expand, here's some other plant choices. We can't be beating up people who are just, you know, who may be on a different line than we are for their plant choices. But that's a big one. And I have to caution, you know, if we have a new gardener and somebody's pounding on them, I will say, nope, we're not doing that. We're not being mean. Let's just let them do this, and then they're going to figure it out. You know, it's hard. Yes, ma'am.
Is that, I just wonder where there is native lantana.
Mm-hmm.
The yellow native lantana. Is that
Depressa.
Is that well? Is that, does that grow up here, or is it too cold?
It doesn't get through the winter usually here.
Yeah.
There is a perennial called Miss Huff, and it will get through the winter here if we have a mild winter. Cobb County, it's everywhere.
Is it native?
No.
No. My Miss House has survived even that terrible winter we had 2 years ago. It's in really horrible dirt, and it amazes me that it comes back every year.
I have a friend of mine who's not a plant person, and he has a hillside like this, and he has a granddaughter, and he said, I want butterflies. And he's not going to shop for natives. He needed a quick fix. And Miss Huff is not invasive. It's not a problem. It attracts butterflies. And so for him, I just said, Miss Huff that hill. And then when you move, and I can teach you about other things, but it stabilized that hill, and his granddaughter just loves all the butterflies that come
How
there.
do you spell that?
Miss Huff.
H-U-F-F.
H-U-F-F. And it has yellow and orange and kind of reddish blooms.
Yeah.
What's your thought about cultivars of natives? Like, I was at a local nursery and bought Wachner's rhododendron. I don't know if we have our native catawbas, and or some people call them rosebay. But it was a short rhododendron. It's what they had, and then the flame azaleas. I know that some of them have been hybridized, but we have some that I just see out in the woods that look perfectly fine as is.
I think it depends on the species. I'm generally a native all the way, but bee balm is a good example. Many of our bee balms get powdery mildew, right? And that is unsightly in our garden. You don't want to spray for it. And the reason they're coming out with cultivars is because the cultivars are being bred to not get powdery mildew. So then you have to kind of weigh what you want to do.
What I was going to say about the cultivars is a lot of times what they're doing is trying to pick for the bigger flower or different colors, but that's going to alienate the pollinators.
Yeah, you're not breeding for... Yeah, a good example is my mom never really understood what I did, and she bought a small house, and I landscaped it for her, and I loved it. And I did, so she had cut flowers, and I picked things that she wouldn't have to mess with. She's an old, was an old Southern lady, very junior league type of, not anything like me. But then she started dating somebody, who tore it all up and put knockout roses in. And when I pulled up to the house, I had to take a lap because and they had no ecological value whatsoever, and they didn't even smell like real roses. Yeah, and I don't know where I got that tangent, but yeah, the cultivars. Find out why they're a cultivar, and then everybody's just got to make their choice, right?
I think they're maybe a third the size of a wild rose bay. So if you want something in a
Maybe
smaller
smaller.
spot, but
Yeah.
otherwise I can't tell much difference.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like you mentioned, they're breeding. The plant breeders are breeding for something, and that may mean taking out something that we think is desirable. But truly, as long as it's not invasive and it's have fun, it's your yard. Have a good time with it. Enjoy it. I have my great-great-grandmother's snowball bush. No ecological value. There's never a pollinator on it, but I would not take any amount of money for that snowball bush because it was my great-great-grandmother's.
What kind of bush was it?
It's a snowball bush.
Oh, yeah, those snowball bushes.
Yeah, I have a picture of my mom at 3 years old in front of it, and I was always a plant person like y'all. So even as a kid, when my parents moved, I, as the 10-year-old, am digging it up. So now it's at the cabin. And my older daughter recently got married in a gazebo, and I dried the flowers. And as the ceremony started, I spread them on her path as she is feeling the ancestry of all the women that came before her. Her fiance cried. Yeah, so I wouldn't take anything for that. No ecological value snowball bush.
I just have one question about deer, because I'm just learning. The deer jump over fences?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Do they climb stairs?
Yes.
Yes.
They've been on my porch. We have a lower porch that has steps this way, and then you have to turn and go this way. They've been on my porch. And you'll notice the fence that we have in the apple orchard is 10 feet with wire. All right?
And a dog.
There's a reason.
And they can sometimes, if it's sort of an open one, they'll figure out how to squeeze through.
Yeah.
It's pretty creative.
I've heard of some people using double fences because the deer is afraid of being confined between two fences, even if both of them are not high enough to prevent an obstacle. The deer just doesn't want to get stuck between them.
And they can't see, if you have a double fence, they have trouble judging.
Yes.
If it's the same fence. We have to worry about deer and bear. So we have, around all my beehives, I have a bear fence. And then we have the 10-foot high. But if somebody leaves the gate open, even if it's a work day and there's people here, the deer will come in through the gate, even if there's tractors and everything on. And then we'll get to work, and then we'll have apple trees eaten because the deer happily got trapped, like in those movies where they're trapped in the department store. So they're like, come on, let's go. No, they're eating all of our apple trees. Yes.
So, I used to work for a nursery that supplied the big box stores. I just wanted to add that the manager of the store itself, they won't do anything or pass on the input. There's always a representative from the nursery there, during day, like I was for like 5 years. And what works the best is if you bring a list in and give it to that person. The manager of the store doesn't have anything to do with, what kind of product the nursery supplies. And they actually do ask, once a year there's a meeting and, they ask for suggestions of specific plants that people are asking for.
Yeah.
So I just, to be more effective, that's the best way to do it, really. Because the manager, they're what do they call it? Pay on point, or Home Depot doesn't own any of the plants.
Right. Oh yeah, that I know.
Isn't it Rambo Nursery out of Dallas supplies?
Yeah.
That's probably where you need to go, is to Rainbow Nursery and sort of say, hey,
That's what I was trying to say, that